But any questions? So there will be, so the quiz review is up there. There'll be a brief lecture, like a mini lecture, because I know we're not going to finish incongruity resolution theory. We'll just start it. We'll open the door just like we did on Tuesday. But we will be able to get through superiority theory and even play some games and see if it holds up. And so you've got, oh, if you didn't look at it, this is like my top 5 guys on the lookout. Gary Larson had this fascination with cows when he did a lot of his cartoons. But anyway, if you look at the discussion forum, someone asked me last week how to get there. It's week 4, so that means you haven't asked. So if you're lost, just go to discussions, and it's perfectly fine. Don't be embarrassed. I just want to make sure that I can see it. There we go. No one's answered it yet, but all it really is about. Well, Jesus is a part of it. It's watching something and describing the humor through one of the 4 lenses. So actually, 2 of the 4 lenses. So just kind of comparing and contrasting 2 of the 4 theories that we saw. A little clip to watch. It's older, but I think it still holds up. But it fits well. I think you could actually describe it through any of the 4 lenses. So that's why I picked it. I spent an ungodly amount of time trying to find just the perfect clips for you guys, but that's the kind of person that I am. So we're done with Freud. Oh my gosh, there we go. How many clicks does it take? There we go. So let's get the ball rolling on this thing called superiority theory. It's an ancient view, and the reason I put that up there was just to remind me to tell you the first thing you should write down about superiority theory is it is the oldest theoretical perspective on humor. That doesn't mean it always came from the world of psychology. It's just that some people you may have heard of actually talked about humor quite a bit. But in a nutshell, superiority theory, well, let's save the nutshell actually. First, let's talk about our old people and what they said. Oh my gosh, we're going way back, like 500. Well, Jesus just came up, so before Jesus, 500 BC. Before he showed up, Plato and Aristotle. Yes, these 2 famous philosophers that you've probably heard of. I'm not sure if you ever took Philosophy 110 or Philosophy 100, and I'm not sure if you did, if you covered the humor part. But Plato and Aristotle both had, I guess the point is, they both had very negative views on humor. I mean, if you think of the world back then, we don't have the need to use humor to market things or to sell things. Really, the only places you saw humor was maybe in some type of production that was being done. But as far as you and I, it's seen as a negative thing to be quote unquote humorous. In fact, here's the words that Plato used. Plato said, there's 3 words you need to write down. Humor originates in malice. That's bad. In other words, you're only doing this to get attention for yourself. That was his idea. So thumbs down to people who are jokey all the time. It's not becoming, put it that way. Aristotle called it the species of the ugly. Oh, that's not good. He would not like my teaching. Leave the room, Mr. Bunting. It came to my head, so why not? Let it out. And then Hobbes, he's not up there yet. So, in other words, not very good. And then another philosopher named Hobbes, who you may have heard of, said that the only reason people use humor is to enhance the self and put down others. Maybe this is where the legacy of not being funny in a place like a classroom or a church or places that we hold in esteem and regard. I'm actually pretty positive it's these views where that came from, because you think of Plato and Aristotle, those are teachers, right? Those are our first world-renowned teachers. So I'm pretty sure that's where our little paradox leads in from. Well, You might be wondering, who is that handsome fellow with the flat top? Oh, tell by my reaction. His name is Charles Gruner. Charles and I have we've had one brief conversation. Does he look like a humor researcher? Maybe like a retired gym teacher who's going to smack you with a dodgeball? Yeah, that's actually kind of how he communicates too. I think you'll understand in the next 10 or 15 minutes why you can feel the frustration. Gruner has an idea about humor that he still to this day holds on to. He's retired, so he's not like really teaching anymore, and he's not really doing research anymore, but I'm sure he still holds on to this. I think I mentioned last time talking about Freud that it was pretty remarkable that he ended up changing his theory a little bit. Remember, he had tendential wit, and he said that's everything. But then later he came back and said, you know what, I was wrong. It turns out there's dad jokes too, non-tendential wit. No. Most people that write a theory, and maybe it's because you wrote it, I guess they see it as like their baby, and they'll hold on to it, even in desperation, claiming that it's right, no matter what. Even if people present a mountain of evidence saying, it's not right. It's just, so part of superiority theory, and that's where we can write the word superiority theory. Gruner took what Hobbes said, what Plato said, what Aristotle said, and he came up with at the time, which was not revolutionary, but it was a modern twist on humor when he came up with it in the 90s. So he came up with something he called superiority theory, the superiority theory of humor. Now, a little bit of context before we start writing lists and all the notes and things like that. Because you might hear this and wonder, how did this ever gain a lot of traction? Because while there's parts of it that are correct, it's pretty easy to find examples that don't fit into the theory. Because Gruner said this explains, this is his first mistake, he said it explains everything, all humor. Ugh. No one showed him that cartoon of the elephant, the blind man, and the fact that maybe just explaining some is okay, Gruner. No, he said his theory describes everything. At the time, we're in the 90s, there really wasn't much going on in the field of humor research. I want to put this in context. You had Freud do his thing. Lots of people were interested. And then we kind of had a lag between Freud and some of the older theories and then benign violation theory. We're talking decades. So superiority was one of the few ones that popped up in the 90s, which is probably why it gained a lot of attention. But anyway, here you go. So first, Gruner said, superiority theory, all humor is a form of playful aggression. And that aggression is on a spectrum from very mild and almost unnoticeable to very extreme and very overt. For example, a roast. I'm not sure if any of you have ever watched a roast. You know what that is. Someone sits in a chair and a bunch of people that he may or may not know belittle him. Going places that you just shouldn't go. But it's funny to some people. So sometimes it's the aggression, obviously, we don't even need to talk about it. It's just right there. But sometimes it's a little more subtle. But Gruner said all humor contains aggression in some way. What the superiority part means is that we laugh because the humor in some way makes us feel superior to others, somehow. So it explains all humor. I know I'm saying things probably in like 3 different ways, which drives you crazy. It explains all humor. All humor contains aggression, which is on a spectrum from mild to really extreme. And something is funny because it makes us feel superior in some way. So he's taking some from Hobbes and Aristotle, Plato. The idea that humor is putting down someone or something in some way. So just think of maybe, we already talked about how, pretty much laid it out there, that not all humor is necessarily aggressive. Like the dad jokes, the puns, like let us take our seats, right? what the hell, where would the aggression be in there? But Gruner said, nope, even that, even something like that. And I'll give you an example, which will sound ridiculous in a little bit. But even he's something like that, all puns, everything. 3 ingredients, is that there? Yes, 3 ingredients to all humor. It's your job to find it. Number 1, we know there's aggression of some kind. Number 2, there is a target. And number 3, there has to be some kind of sudden perception. This might make what you're about to write down might not make sense, even writing it down. Some type of sudden perception of winning or victory by the audience, and that's why they laugh. Now, for some types of humor, it's pretty easy to see how this would fit. Someone falls down, you point and laugh at them and tell your friends, hey, look at that idiot. Okay, you've got a target, you've got a little bit of aggression, and the joy is in you being the one that didn't fall down. Easy, right? But what about, well, for example, what about a pun? What about my little daughter's joke, knock, knock? Let us take our seats. Well, we'll get there. We'll see if you agree. Maybe you do agree, maybe you don't. It's laughter. What does laughter do? Remember, laughter has a purpose in our theories. We find something funny. What is the laughter? Well, the first, whenever I say this out loud, I always picture like the apes jumping around the, what is it called? The obelisk. So number 1, laughter's first job is to signal to your target that you won, a signal of victory. And the more you laugh, the more you feel superior. I guess we all feel, if you laughed at John Mulaney a little bit, we all like to belittle people from the olden times. Still the olden times people. We're modern Americans. I don't know. It's a bit of a stretch for me. But the other job that laughter has, this will be a word some of you have heard before, as you sit in the class. Laughter returns your body to homeostasis. What does that mean? Some of you may have heard it's a word that's used a lot in biology. Dominic Jacobs said, oh yeah, what does that mean?
It's like, I don't want to say everything your body is at peace, but like everything your body is balanced.
There we go. Actually, those are the 2 exact words I was going to use. Balance and normality. That's what homeostasis is. The easiest example would be like your body temperature. 98.6, or in my case, 97.9. I'm apparently cold. But right, your body gets cold, your body does things to bring it back to homeostasis. There you go. Well, what are we talking about in this case? Well, Gruner said that you get excited. Your body gets a little bit geeked up, right? Because you're winning. Oh, you can't walk around like that all the time. So the laughter helps you return back down to your homeostasis. Helps calm you down. Almost true. If you come up to Gruner, here's a little bit of a history lesson too about Gruner. At the conferences, the humor conferences, it's not like he wore a shirt like, hey, come up to me. He had like an open challenge to anyone at the humor conferences. Come up to me with any bit of humor that you think defies my theory, and I'll explain to you why it doesn't. And he stares at you like that the whole time. And then when you give him something that you're pretty sure kind of contrives it, he stares at you for like 20 more seconds, like he's thinking, and then he spits out some kind of answer that he thinks explains it from his theory and walks away. Even if, like, what? That doesn't make any sense. What about puns? So he's got this challenge. So all humor, and he's got a little contest, which like I wrote down, there sometimes feels a little bit forced, to say the least. There's some examples in your book. So here's the formula for how he figures out and finds the aggression, even in seemingly benign forms of humor. So you too can be a superiority expert when it comes to humor. The first step is you need to understand who the target is. Sometimes it's obvious, but sometimes it's not. And as I'm talking, I'm going to try to find, I pretty much know how to explain it on my own, but I think the way the author put it in your book is a little bit more entertaining. So find out who the target is. Find out, number two, how exactly is this person being attacked? Oh, come on, I should have remembered to look this up. And then number three, find out why. Oh, here we go. I just saw it. Oh, perfect. So what about puns? Sometimes the target is not in the joke itself. That's what Gruner argued. Because people, initially, of course, the contest, people come up to him with something like just a silly knock-knock joke. Well, where's the humor in that? To Gruner, we don't need to write this down necessarily, but just understand his mindset and why it's so frustrating. Because I think most of us would agree, and most humans would agree, that knock-knock jokes are not, there's no aggression. It's just supposed to make you laugh by tricking you. He argued that all puns, so already he's covering all jokes and all puns, the target is people who are less intelligent than you. Because isn't it true, and I would agree with this, puns and riddles, to some extent, are kind of like a game, right? Like a riddle to solve. And the target is all those idiots who can't figure it out. And so we like sharing these things. We like testing people, like if they can guess the pun or not. And we laugh because they couldn't figure it out. Does that make sense? So the target, we don't know if you're going to be a target or not. And maybe you're part of the victory with us. We all laugh because we all get it. You're not laughing because you don't get it. You're the target. We're the winners. Aha. So puns and jokes are like a test of intelligence, social intelligence. So every single joke you come up with them, he would look at you like that and just regurgitate that in a very monotone voice. And then he would walk away. But one of the most ridiculous ones. So see if you can guess what his explanation. So maybe you've seen like a Looney Tunes cartoon. It pops up in different ways, in different forms, but the classic example is Elmer Fudd. You ever heard of Elmer Fudd? Little guy on Looney. Anyway, so Elmer Fudd's walking around and he goes up to a wall and there's water coming out of the wall, streaming out. So what does he do? He plugs it, right? Like, oh, I'm gonna fix that. And what happens? Another hole pops up, right? And so he plugs that. And then another one, right? Until he's got like his entire body like trying to cover the holes. And he thinks he has it. And then what happens? Starts coming out of his ears. Exactly. Makes kids laugh. Like, oh my God. Because it's a violation of the schema. It seems unlikely or unrealistic. So we're laughing, right? Where's the aggression in that? I'll say exactly what Gruner said. I couldn't find out why I couldn't find this on Tuesday. I think I would. Well, I'll tell you. So see what you think. So I guess the example that the person brought to him, he's giving you a real example. It was a plumber plugging a hole in a water pipe, and then the water starts pouring out of his ear. That was the cartoon. That's it. A one-frame cartoon, plugging a hole and it comes out of his ear. Gruner said that the cartoon causes the viewer to laugh at the damage being done to the plumber's brain cells by the water going through his head. What? That never even crossed my mind. Did it ever cross your mind for 1 second that we're laughing at Elmer Fudd's brain being destroyed? No, but that's just an example of the links that Gruner would go to explain his humor. So what do we do with this? Well, first of all, before we write this stuff down, there are new reincarnations of superiority theory. So this doesn't exactly get used. Superiority theory in Gruner's form, it does have some worth. It does have some positive implications, and that's what I wrote POS. Positive implications, but it also has some negative implications. So it's important because it does explain a lot of humor. In fact, you might as well write this down now. I have it kind of in an awkward place. It describes a whole category of humor that a lot of us enjoy called disparagement humor. There's a whole category. And it comes in different forms. Disparagement humor is exactly what it sounds like. It just means a group of people or a person is being disparaged by someone else. Whether that's through satire, now you know what that is, sarcasm, teasing, mocking, roasting, disparagement humor. And this is where superiority theory has some value. Because that is where we see a target and an audience and aggression of various forms. Again, Gruner's mistake was claiming that it covers all humor. Then it just starts getting a little silly and really contrived. But what are these positive implications? Well, number one, I don't want to say too much because it's going to come back to our class in a few weeks. A lot of people, when they watched the Chippendales clip, which I still haven't shown you, but we kind of watched it. I mean, we watched it in silence. That was the day the music died here in the classroom. A lot of people, when they watched that, thought, Chris Farley, what a genius. This guy is awesome because he knows he's huge. He does dance well, but he's not ashamed at all. Like, he's just out there making us all laugh, laughing at himself first before we can laugh at him. So one really positive implication is what we call the mastery of the self. Humor is a very powerful tool for mastery of the self through something called self-deprecating humor. And that's simply when you laugh at something, folly. I just used the word folly today. Your turn. At 8 o'clock today, you have to use the word folly in a serious way. Right? You laugh at something about yourself, and that takes away everyone else's power to make fun of you. If you can laugh at it first, suddenly it's teasing you about it is a lot less fun. Like, oh, well, never mind. Let's move on to the next target. A lot of people watched that clip and said, well, you can't really make fun of Chris Farley for being huge because he already thinks it's funny and he doesn't care. Takes away the aggression. The other is something called liberation. We're actually going to revisit this in about 5 minutes. But one way to use humor, what this means is to deflate and take the power away from very serious attacks that are coming at you. I know this is a little bit wordy, by attacking the weapon that the attacker is using. What? So it's not making fun of the self. It's using humor. Maybe I should say this in a simpler way. Someone is attacking you in a way. They're using some type of weapon against you. You use that very weapon in a humorous way to take away their power. This will make sense in about 5 minutes. How many times am I going to say that this semester? Just hold on. Wait 6 weeks. And then coping humor, or coping itself. There is no doubt that sometimes being a little aggressive in your humor is just a way of coping with a situation or a scenario that you find yourself in. Like Norm Macdonald, making fun of the coronavirus. He's not belittling people who have passed away. It's just you're exhausted. Like, it's been a year. All I can do now is make jokes about it, and it makes me feel better. So using humor as a way to cope in a negative situation. Sounds a lot like Freud. There is an extreme variant of this called gallows humor. So I guess maybe gallows should have been invented underneath coping. Anyone know what gallows humor is? Let me show you an example and see if you can define it. This is a really quiet clip. I don't know why. Even in classrooms with a great sound system, it's not the easiest to hear, but you have to read words anyway. I know that's hard. It's from a foreign language film. It's really good, called Life is Beautiful. Anyone ever heard of this movie? No? It's a story. It won the Best Picture one year. It was, I think, the first film with subtitles to win the Oscar for Best Picture. But remember, I went to it and I was thinking like, oh, a movie with subtitles. Great. I don't want to read. That's why I'm seeing a movie. But it's incredible. It's a really good film. It's a story about it's about a family that ends up getting thrown into the concentration camps during World War II, and a father and his son. The one positive thing is they end up in the same concentration camp. Usually families were getting separated left and right. They're from Italy, so they are Italian. They're Italian Jews, and they were woken up by the Nazi army, and they're getting put into the concentration camp. That's what the movie's about. Sort of how the story is about how the dad helped his son survive. Does that make sense? So that's the context. This is a scene from that movie, and it's a point where they just got brought into the concentration camp, and the dad is trying to figure out, like, how do I help my son cope with what's about to happen? He doesn't know what the soldiers are going to say to them. The soldiers are coming in, and I'll just let it speak for itself. But I think the humor will be obvious. And again, I apologize for the quietness.
Als Herr, ich sage das nur einmal. Comincia il gioco, chi c'è? Chi non c'è da te? Ecco, einmal die Leute, die das Lager transportiert worden. Chi vince a 1000 punti, il primo classificato vince un carro armato, Aber, lui. Io non so che stavo facendo, non si può dire cosa. Che non riconoscono che molto, e questa è l'eroica. Ogni giorno vi daremo la classifica generale da quella cosa sarà. All'ultimo classificato verrà attaccato un cartello con un scritto acido qui sulla schiena. Ja, Ehrenbürger und deutsche Vaterland Arbeitsbedürfnis, das Bauerndeutschen Reich teilzunehmen. Noi facciamo la parte di quelli cattivi che usano. Chi ha paura prende punti. Dai Grundregeln wollen wir nie vergessen. Jetzt, also nicht zu fliehen. Zweitens, eure Ehrenbefehle oder Fragen. Drittens, Ihr Versuch eines Aufstandes wird mit dem russischen Regen gestanden. Ist das da? In 3 casi si perdono tutti i punti. Li perdono. 1, quelli che si mettono a piangere. 2, quelli che vogliono vedere la mamma. 3, quelli che hanno fame e vogliono la merendina. Contatela! Non è wirklich seinen Jahre. Es wird mir etwas geschehen, die Forschung zu verfolgen. È molto facile prendere punti per la fame. Io stesso ieri ho perso 40 punti perché volevo a tutti i costi un panino con la marmellata. Organizzare da piloti. Noch etwas zu die Frage. Ich bin alles raus aus Europa schnell. Non cedete in scaletta perché non ve li danno, ce li mangiamo tutti noi. Aspetta, sparare. Io ieri ho mangiato 20. Vai. Ma ti faccia. Ieri morgen, però era buono. Sta bene, lascia fare. Ora potremo sagen, mit mehr Arbeit, die Dimension des Lagers leicht begreifen. Guarda, se vado di fretta, ma oggi sto giocando a nascondino, ora vado, non mi fanno fare.
So clearly, if you're in the concentration camps, you are facing an absolute impossible situation. And that's what gallows humor is. Gallows humor is when you are in an unescapable situation. This is it. You're facing death. In fact, it came from facing death. The gallows, of course, is a place where people were executed. And there's a long-standing phenomenon where people that were facing the gallows, instead of crying, would start making fun of their executed. It's almost like your last, right? You can't win anything else. This is it. This is how you're going to go out. So instead of going out in one way, you're choosing to go out defiant. That's what gallows humor is. So it's using humor when you are faced with an inescapable situation. So it's very specific. Gallows humor isn't something, obviously, that we see used a lot, because how many of us find ourselves in inescapable situations a lot? So our positive implications. I'll show you an example of liberation in a second. But before we do, it actually makes sense to talk about these. The thing that I'm going to show you comes from, well, you might have guessed, Dave Chappelle. Anyone know who Dave, maybe you've heard of him, maybe you haven't. He's from Ohio. In fact, he just put on a big showcase at Kenyon College in Ohio. Over the past few months, he invited lots of stand-up comedians, but Dave Chappelle uses his humor. He's considered, he gets labeled controversial. The reason, I don't know why I used air quotes just now, controversial is a real word. But he gets labeled as controversial because he uses humor in very specific ways. Dave Chappelle is a really uber intelligent, very connected, he understands what's going on, and he uses humor to share his perspective on things. But what I want to watch is a good example of the negative implications as well. The first is that, they both include risk. It's not the word up there, but using disparagement humor comes at a risk because you never know the degree to which the audience is going to receive it. Remember, aggression comes from mild to extreme. So in disparagement humor, the first negative implication is disparagement humor comes in degrees, from mild to extreme. The difficulty is you don't know who sitting in your audience. One person's mild is another person's extreme. One person's extreme is another person's mild. And then there's a bunch of people in between. So when you use disparagement humor, you never know what the reaction is going to be. Which leads and is connected to the second negative implication is we all understand, at least now you guys do, because you know more about the science of humor than 99% of the population. You know that humor in this form, this is where our social paradox comes. That same piece of humor that bonds half the class might make the other half of the class want to withdraw. And we had this conversation on Tuesday with the warning that what you're about to watch may make you feel uncomfortable. But that was Dave Chappelle's point. He actually likes using his humor to make his audiences uncomfortable because he also wants you to think. That's his kind of brand of humor. He's like a cerebral comedian, put it that way. He makes you laugh, but at the same time, sometimes you realize, wow, there's a meaning behind this. And he does this weird thing. A lot of his comedy shows, a lot of people don't like his stand-up comedy shows because he's really, really funny. He has his own show. It's the Dave Chappelle Show. But on his stand-up, he'll have his jokes in his stand-up, but then for the next 10 minutes, he's serious and talking about social issues. And you're like, wow, this guy, I need to listen to this guy. And then he goes back to the jokes, and it's this weird, I don't know, a lot of people call it comedic jazz that he does. It's just all over the place. But anyway, let's get to it. So he uses, one way that he used humor as liberation turned out to be one of the most controversial things. I love it, right? You get this, you guys are seeing all the edgy humor that's out there. You saw the Family Guy thing that was banned. You saw the Saturday Night Live commercial that people wrote in and complained about. Heinous, remember, the clone for dogs. This clip got many, many, many letters written to Comedy Central saying, I am never, Brian, I guess, what do we call that today? Cancel culture? Well, more air quotes. Millions of people of all ethnic backgrounds, decided that, nope, we're canceling Comedy Central. I can't believe you aired something like this. Maybe with the misunderstanding that this is on the Dave Chappelle show. So Dave Chappelle wrote this skit. We'll see what you think, if it works or not.
Breakfast is served.
Look, hon, my sister just had another baby. Look at this little bundle of joy.
She's got those nigger lips.
I know. Oh, is Tim still asleep?
I think so.
He sure is one lazy nigger. Good morning, Mom.
Morning, Dad.
Good morning. You know, Tim, we're having a dinner party tonight. I trust you'll be here.
Oh, I can't. I have my first big date with Jenny Halstead.
Jenny has a date tonight with a nigger boy from school.
What? Oh, God, no.
No, Teddy, that's his name. Timmy Nigger.
Oh, of course.
That nigger. He's a very good athlete and so well spoken. That family's going places. I mean, we're rich. They're nigger rich.
Oh,
Morning, niggas. Why, it's Tim, our colored milk fan.
And it's my favorite family, the little milk too.
The niggas.
So, show smells good. You niggas cooking?
we sure are. There's some leftover bacon if you like some.
Ooh, not for me. I know better than to get between a nigga and their paw. I get my fingers bit. Here you go. I hate to bother you about this, but well, you didn't pay your bill last week. And I know how forgetful you niggas are when it comes to paying bills.
Well, it slipped my mind. There you go. Sorry about that.
Oh, nigga, please. Take me in with them words. Have a hot date with the wife tonight.
All right, take care.
All right, peace, nigga. Niggas?
Stevenson, party 4.
Stevenson, party 4. Table 5, please. Bon appetit.
Nigger, party 2. Nigger, party 2.
Look at here, Jack. Just because we're covered didn't mean we came out here to be disrespected, okay?
We're the nigger family. Oh, hi, Clifton.
Oh, hello, little nigga. These are the niggas I was telling you.
You the nigga that burnt the bottle over Ronnie said at the Ducks game.
No, not that nigga. The nigga from work, the middle ground.
Oh, okay. Have a nice meal.
I bet you'll get the finest table of niggas ever got in this restaurant. Oh, Lord. This racism is killing me inside.
What's your dinner party face on? Hello.
Well, you must be the wetbacks.
Sanchez, don't call us wetbacks, nigger. We find it offensive. I'm just kidding. We are the wetbacks.
They only told you.
Oh, you're one crazy nigger.
What'd you think? For a class full of white people. Did it make you feel uncomfortable? Dominic, I kind of tell some of you. In fact, on Tuesday, she sits right there. In the beginning, I don't think, she had never seen it before. She like almost wanted like, oh, like she was like physically like, but then I don't know. And some people, when they laugh at some of the things, they feel weird. But why did it make you feel uncomfortable?
I mean, as a white person, it's not something that you should or really can say in a social setting like freely. And I'm not saying that I go behind closed doors and I drop N-words, but like,
Oh, come on.
it's something that's so taboo and not right for us.
Yeah.
I can see, but I can also see Black people feeling really uncomfortable with this too. Because
Oh, absolutely.
what white people say.
I've used this in different ways, like in Psych 110. Weirdly enough, whenever we talk about the social paradox, and weirdly enough, Black students are very comfortable with this, and it's the white students who actually feel really like maybe they shouldn't have aired that, and the Black students are like, oh, why? Mostly, like if this is, but I guess, but I do understand where you're going from because it's not something. Assuming your upbringing, it's something that I certainly wouldn't go around saying anywhere, but it all depends. And in fact, we talk about a social paradox. It's usually when you hear words like these used in jokes that makes you think like, why is that funny? Like that's not okay. So he had two goals in this. The first goal was to use the N-word as many times as possible in a skit. In fact, at the time he did this, Comedy Central admittingly didn't really know if this was even allowed. It was like you said, it's like the taboo things we usually don't have rules about. It's just you don't do this. And when they aired this, they really weren't sure. I don't know. Saturday Night Live did a similar thing when I was about 12 years old. Dana Carvey, he's a comedian, he used to be on Saturday Night Live, but he said the word penis 50 times in a skit. And the reason he did that is because there was no rule about it. And they wanted to test the waters, and of course they had letters written in and things like that. And his second goal was to use, and you probably picked up on it, he tried to use every N-word based slang term that people use inappropriately, appropriately amongst white people, amongst the Black community, the way they talk to each other. The context for this is a little bit removed now, but at the time, there was Facebook wasn't around, but if it was, what we all would have been arguing about online, yeah, I'm an expert, is in the Black community, there was a uproar over whether or not the N-word should be allowed to be used in like albums, in the music industry, on TV, because on one side, people were saying the only way to get rid of this is to respect it and not use it at all. And other people were saying we're allowed to say this because we're Black. There was this big fight over is it allowed, is it not? And Chappelle did this to kind of, he didn't really do it to shut people up. He did it to get everyone talking about it. He wanted to make the audience uncomfortable on purpose by watching this to start a conversation, not to say this is right or this is wrong. And that's Dave. That's Dave Chappelle. That's how he used. So do you see what the liberation is obvious though, right? When I said use a weapon, it might have been like, what do you mean use? So you take the weapon that society uses, you present it in a humorous way and throw it right back at the attackers. And it makes people stop and think just for a second. Because if you caught it, there was one point in there where he said, this racism is killing me. Did you hear that? So he's not a proponent of using the N-word, by the way. So a lot of people think, Dave, like, that's actually not true. In fact, he's not at all. Like, he did this on purpose to start a conversation. And if you ever get a chance, maybe we'll watch it at some point. I don't know if there's like not that there needs to be an appropriate place to put it, but he hosted Saturday Night Live the Saturday after the election. Not sure if any of you saw that or not. Probably one of the best Saturday Night Live monologues I've ever seen, and it's so Chappelle. It's like, that's probably why they asked him to be there. Anyone know why he got in quote unquote trouble for that one? Maybe you saw it. Did you see it? You're shaking your head. You know why he got in trouble?
I know he smoked, but I don't think that was the reason.
No. He became controversial because he didn't take a side. It was right after the election. And he got in quote unquote trouble because everyone expected to come out saying Trump jokes left and right? That's the side he's supposed to be on. And instead, his message was a little bit more about unity, right? I mean, there was some jokes here and there, of course there was. But then he got really serious do you remember at the end, he got really serious with the audience and he talked about how, let's put all this aside and just start getting along, basically. I mean, it was more eloquent than that. So he got in trouble for not taking the right side during his monologue. When everyone said, aren't you supposed to be over there? Like, what the hell? This is your chance. But he didn't. And instead he said a lot of things that made people think. Like, huh. Anyway, that's Dave. So that's why I like him. He's a different kind of comedian. He gets away with it. He gets admonished for it sometimes, but anyway, that's him. So I guess that's the quote. You don't need to write this down, but that's what embodies his brand of liberating humor. The world of humor is actually filled with some really great quotes. Some of the best quotes come from our field, if I don't mind me saying so myself. So we've considered Chappelle. All right, well, let's do some replication. Let's see if superiority theory and some ideas or maybe research that's been done holds up. Now, first of all, you should probably know this about me from the beginning. One, I typically don't like talking about politics at all. Number two, and I mean this with full sincerity, I don't care which side of the aisle you're on whatsoever. So just as a preface, completely. This is the girl up here kept saying on Tuesday, I feel like I'm in a judgmental free zone. You absolutely are. So just keep that in mind as we go forward. But the problem with testing this stuff is you've got to pick something that splits people in some ways, right? So there's no other way to do it. So the superiority stance, Gruner, one of his ideas was that the more hostility and aggression is included in a piece of humor, the funnier the audience is going to find it, especially if they do not like the target being admonished. In other words, you can get as aggressive as you want. And in fact, the more aggressive you get, the more your audience is going to laugh. So he argued, now again, you have to be on the right side of things. So he argued that if you are on that right side of things, the more aggression, the better. Can't get enough. Up that hostility. Nine, kind of a small sample size, but let's see if this holds up. So we're actually going to do an actual replication of an actual study that was done to test this amongst people who both support and did not support Donald Trump during his presidency. I know it's an easy target, and I'm not trying to be cliche. But this is what was shown to people. So I think humor is subjective. I do get that. But there's a series of cartoons that I would agree go from very mild hostility, if anything, to pretty hostility. Put it that way. So we're going to watch a cascade. This is the perfect time for a Mount Union tour to come in, by the way. Every time I talk about superiority, I hold my breath that someone's going to walk by the room. This is not education. So we'll start there. This got a few giggles last time. You're like really laughing. The fun thing about this cartoon is both supporters and non-supporters of Trump found this funny, like almost equally. But it's technically making fun of Donald Trump, I guess, but in a very mild way, right? Okay, so what would you, just shout it out. What would you guys, on a scale, we don't need to do like the cards this time. Actually, I should have those for this class because you need them so often. Like 9. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how funny is it? The what?
Is it how funny it is or how aggressive it is?
How funny it is. So 1, 3. No one else wants to say a number. That's fine.
I think it's like a 6.
I think it's pretty funny.
I'm going to give it a 5.
The consensus on Tuesday was around like a 3-ish if we had to average everyone out. So it sounds like we're pretty similar. All right, so moving on. This actually ended up being the funniest one, which actually is nice. So let's draw a map. So we started out, let's make a scale here. And this is just, here's 1, here's 10. Our first cartoon, I think there's 5. So we were right here. How would you guys rate this one?
Solid 8.
Solid 8. All right, so we'll put it closer to here. All right, next one. Actually, there's 4, not 1. No, there's 1. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I was like, this is like super accurate, but it's not that funny.
Yeah.
I'd probably put this at like 1 or 2.
So this one's lower. Yeah, you know, Tuesday, same this one, everyone kind of stared at it like, that's a cartoon. Like, oh, I guess more, so now we're back down, so. And I'm just ballparking you over there. All right, 2 more to go. And here's, I guess, where the hostility starts to get increased. Macy looks like she's not sure if she should laugh or feel uncomfortable, or maybe it's happening at the same time. What do you think?
No, she doesn't.
And this is the perfect time for the tour to come in. Bring them, come on! The dad in the MAGA hat, like, come on in! I knew it, you liberal educators! Sorry.
Sounds like my dad.
You told me this would happen. Anyway. Not the craziest shit you've ever heard. I'm sorry. But anyway. So what do you think?
6 or 7.
Yeah.
Let's just for the fun, let's just pretend this one doesn't exist. I feel like it ruined everything last time too. But so are we going down or up? We're going up? Okay. Everyone says up? Okay.
Maybe not that high.
And I'll put the 10, is that better? I'll put the 10 up there. So I'll just put a maybe. Is that okay?
Yeah.
So far we're looking like this. All right, then last but not least. Like, where could you go after this, right? What do you think? Are we going up or down?
That's one.
Let's go up. I strategically take it off the screen as I walk over here. So that went up too? Anyone say down? You didn't like that? Anyone else say down? You're saying down too? On Tuesday, nope, this one wasn't very popular, or the last one. All right, well, it's still up there. It seems like some people thought it went up, so maybe we'll just kind of keep it the same or close to it. But anyway, what Gruner said is it should have just kind of, like there should be no doubt. Again, in other words, we shouldn't have any dissenters in the room. But a funny thing about that last one, sort of like the first one was kind of unifying, which I love. I love it when humor brings people together from both sides of any aisle whatsoever. The last one actually kind of also unified, but in a different way, because when both Trump supporters and non-Trump supporters were shown that, not everyone, but a good faction of the even people who openly said, I don't like this guy at all, didn't find that one, they thought it just crossed some kind of line. Like it was, the aggression was, they totally got it. But while it made them, I guess, think, it made them more, not upset, but I don't know, they just didn't find it funny. Maybe it reminded them of, I don't know, whatever. They just didn't, the humor was kind of lost. And if you saw this, it's kind of magical. When we've studied this, it's not perfect. And everyone's different, which is why you need a big, especially when you study humor, you need big sample sizes because it's all over the place. So Gruner said direct correlation between hostility, and when we do the research, this is not what we see at all. Instead, we see exactly what we drew. And it looked like we were headed that way a little bit. We at least plateaued, put it that way, as a class. And the same thing happened on Tuesday, even though the plummet for the last one was a lot more significant. What we see when we study humor is as the hostility increases, people do find it funnier. To a point. And it seems like there's lines of hostility where you're still gaining humor for some people, but you're losing a lot of the audience. Because we see this inverted U pattern. Humor increases, but then hostility gets to a certain point, and I get it, but everyone's taste in humor is different. This is why there's different comedians that all have their own different style. There's something for everyone. All right, so now we're going to test something else, and well, actually, before we do the test, let me pass this out. And as I'm passing this out, you can write this down. There are two, I think I told you, superiority theory has evolved. We don't just go by Gruner and superiority theory anymore. It's evolved into two different variations. The first one is called vicarious superiority theory. The reason I had not all but Y up there was just to remind you that the obvious, that superiority theory describes some, but not all. So why? So vicarious superiority theory says that as you have developed as a human being in this society, you have sort of vicariously, hence vicarious, you have vicariously collected or become part of two different things. One, something that we call a positive identification class, or PIC, and then something called a negative identification class. A positive identification class is a group or a membership, or call it your tribe, whatever you want to call it, that you get positive emotions from. You feel a sense of affection towards this group. So if you're a Methodist, I don't know why I pulled that one out of my hat. You feel that saying that word makes you feel good because you're part of it and you like it. You have pride in it. We're all Raider strong. Positive identification class. And of course, you've vicariously collected negative ones as well. And these would be groups that make you feel, I don't like them, I'm not part of them, they're different than me. And by the way, you can read the top of this. Again, I can't emphasize enough how much I don't care how you answer these questions, but I'm not collecting these. But so it's yours. I don't care how you answer, but if you know I'm not collecting it, people are usually a little bit more honest. As if you're going to offend Dr. Myers somehow, which is really difficult to do. But anyway, this argues in the world of disparagement humor that they keep it pretty simple. That we find humor when we hear something or see something that disparages one of our negative identification classes, or when we see something that puts our PICs in high regard. The key, they argue, is our self-esteem and our self-enhancement. Two things that human beings psychologically need. We need a positive self-esteem and we need positive self-enhancement. So when we hear jokes that put down an NIC, it increases that. It makes us feel good. In other words, it justifies us. It helps us put down those silly Lutherans. Yeah, that's right. That's why I'm Methodist. I don't know why I'm picking those. I just, really nothing purposeful there. It just popped in my head. You're a Browns fan. You love Steelers jokes, right? It's my tribe. It's what I belong to. And vice versa. So they argue the key to understanding humor is actually not anything funny at all. It's our self-esteem and our self-enhancement. And we vicariously, as we go through life, we collect PICs and NICs, and we find humor when our NICs are put down or our PICs are enhanced. Very simple. And it seems very intuitive. Like, I get it. What else could there be? This is disparagement humor, right? You either like what's being attacked or you don't. Not quite. Again, we find ourselves stuck. The findings, so I said yes and then but. Absolutely this holds up. When someone makes fun of a group you don't like, of course you find humor in it a lot of the time. But it turns out there's another piece of the puzzle that this theory ignores. So go ahead, get these out. And so answer the first one. How much do you like John? Just put yourself somewhere on that spectrum. And I get it, none of us really know him. But just from that brief clip that we watched, do you like him or not? Maybe he's annoying. Norm Macdonald's a good one for that. A lot of people just don't like his style. But anyway, the second one is obvious. Think back to the previous administration. How much did you like it? Maybe you liked it a lot. Maybe you just don't care. You're somewhere in the middle. And then 3, kind of what I'm getting at, is your NICs or PICs. How is this a PIC for you or an NIC, or are you just somewhere in the middle? There's a question on there that has nothing really to do with your PICs or NICs, and that's the first one. Why does it matter how much I like John or not? Well, because of this, something called the dispositional model of humor, or what I like to call the triangle of disparagement. Sounds like a terrible place to be. The original clip I showed was Jimmy Kimmel, but I can't find, that's why he's still on there. I should have gone. Don't write this down. I mean, you can read it if you want. But I'll sum it up for you. And in fact, if you just start reading where it says, in other words, that's probably easier. The triangle of disparagement goes like this. Maybe draw a triangle in your notes if you'd like to. At the peak would be humor. Is it there or not? So that, of course, that's part of the equation. Did we laugh or not? Did we find humor in it or not? And on one point of the triangle to the side, you've got your target. Of course you have your target. That's where vicarious Turing theory stops. Humor and targets. So PICs and NICs. What the triangle of disparagement includes, or the dispositional model of humor, also includes the person who's doing the disparaging. We'll call this person the protagonist. Because I don't know what other word you use. Because sometimes it's a comedian, sometimes it's not a comedian, sometimes your friend. Your mom, your grandpa, or your uncle, or your professor. It turns out how much humor you find in something, of course it has to do with how you feel about the target, but it also has to do with how you feel about the person doing the disparaging. It turns out people that you hold in really high esteem can disparage even targets that you like, and you'll still laugh. You'll still find it funny. When I watched South Park, I don't really watch anymore, but there were times on South Park where they belittled and made fun of things that I would consider my positive identification classes. But I still laughed. That doesn't make any sense. How can someone make fun of something I care about and I can still find humor in it? Well, it's because I like the show. I like the creators. So I guess I didn't take it personally. I know it's supposed to be a joke, but let's see if it holds up. And mind you, this act was done about 2 years ago, I think. Maybe 3 years ago. Somewhere around there. So just keep that in mind. Oh.
Thank you for clapping in my political gazebo material. I'm very grateful. I've never really cared about politics. Or talked about it much. But then, last November, the strangest thing happened. Now, I don't know if you've been following the news, but I've been keeping my ears open. And it seems like everyone, everywhere, is super mad about everything, all the time. I try to stay a little optimistic, even though I will admit, things are getting pretty sticky. Here's how I try to look at it. This is just me. This guy being the president. It's like there's a horse loose in a hospital. It's like there's a horse loose in a hospital. I think eventually everything's gonna be okay, but I have no idea what's gonna happen next. And neither do any of you, and neither do your parents, because there's a horse loose in the hospital. It's never happened before. No one knows what the horse is gonna do next, least of all the horse. He's never been in a hospital before. He's as confused as you are. There's no experts. They try to find experts on the news. They're like, we're joined now by a man that once saw a bird in the airport. It's like, get out of here with that shit. We've all seen a bird in the airport. This is a horse loose in a hospital. When a horse is loose in a hospital, you gotta stay updated. So all day long you walk around, oh, what's the horse doing? The updates, they're not always bad. Sometimes they're just odd. You're like, the horse used the elevator. I didn't know he knew how to do that. The creepiest days are when you don't hear from the horse at all. You're down in the operating room like, hey, has anyone, has anyone heard? Those are those quiet days when people are like, it looks like the horse is finally calmed down. And then 10 seconds later, the horse is like, I'm going to run towards the baby incubators and smash him with my hooks. I got nice hooks and a long tail on the horse. And it's like, oh, that's what I thought you'd say, you dumb fucking horse. And then you go to brunch with people and they're like, there shouldn't be a horse in the hospital. It's like, we're well past that. And then other people are like, well, if there's going to be a horse in the hospital, I'm going to say the N-word on TV. And it's like, those don't match up at all. And then for a second, it seems like maybe we could survive the horse. And then 5,000 miles away, a hippo was like, I have a nuclear bomb. And I'm going to blow up the hospital. And before we could say anything, the horse was like, if you even fucking look at the hospital, I will stomp you to death with my hooks. I dare you to do it. I want you to do it. I want you to do it so I can stomp you with my hooks. I'm so fucking crazy. He's like, you think you're fucking crazy? I'm a fucking hippopotamus. I live in a fucking lake of mud. I'm fucking crazy. And all of us are like, okay. Like poor Andy Cohen at those goddamn reunions. Okay. And then for a second, we were like, maybe the horse catcher will catch the horse. And then the horse is like, I have fired the horse catcher. He can do that? That shouldn't be allowed, no matter who the horse is. I don't remember that in Hamilton. Sometimes, if you make fun of the horse, people will get upset. These are the people that open the door for the horse. I don't judge anyone, but sometimes I ask people, I go, hey, how come you open the door for the horse? And they go, well, the hospital was inefficient. Or sometimes they go, you know, if you're so mad at the horse, how come you weren't mad when the last guy did this 3.5 years ago? You're beating up on the horse for that, when the last guy essentially did the same thing 5 years ago. Like, first off, get out of here with your facts, okay? You're like the kid at the sleepover who after midnight is like, it's tomorrow now. Get the fuck out of here with your technicalities. Just because you're accurate does not mean you're interesting. That was fun when we watched Beetlejuice tonight. So you mean last night? It's after midnight. Why don't you get your sleeping bag and get out of my house? Take your EpiPen. Take your goddamn EpiPen. And get out of my house. But when people say, how come you were never mad at the last guy? I say, because I wasn't paying attention. I used to pay less attention before it was a horse. Also, I thought the last guy was pretty smart. and he seemed good at his job. And I'm lazy by nature. I'm lazy by nature too, so I don't check up on people when they seem okay at their job. You may think that's an ignorant answer, but it's not. It's a great answer. If you left your baby with your mother tonight, you're not going to race home and check the nanny cam. But if you leave your baby with Gary Busey, and now there's Nazis again. When I was a kid, Nazis was just an analogy you would use to decimate your child during an argument at the dinner table. Now there's new Nazis. I don't care for these new Nazis, and you may quote me on that. These new Nazis. Oh, Jews are the worst, and Jews ruin everything, and Jews try to take over your life. Like, you know what, motherfucker? My wife is Jewish. I know all that. How do you know all that?
All right, so now you can also personally rate the act, I guess, of what you thought about it. So the take home for this is the dispositional model of humor. We have sort of seemingly two different dimensions, how you feel about the protagonist and how you feel about the target. Maximum humor with the dispositional model of humor comes, of course, when you really like the protagonist and you really are either dismissive or just simply don't like the target. It's a negative I see. But we also see something magical happen. When people really like the protagonist, that protagonist can get away with belittling and putting down the target. And even people who identify with that identification class seem to start, not extreme humor. They're not like, oh my God, that was the best show ever. But they still get it and they actually still laugh. Like, yeah, I get it. That was funny. I get it. It's a joke. And it's always been the one piece of the puzzle that has been ignored, is the person who's actually disparaged. Now, of course, it doesn't always work. And this is why the social paradox is so important with this, right? Because sometimes you do hold someone up on a pedestal in esteem, and they say something jokingly that really alters your view of them. So it's always risky. And that's why this part of the class is always, I don't know, it makes me uncomfortable too sometimes. Because it's, right, there's no other way to talk about this stuff other than to know you're presenting something that is on purpose risky and in and of itself paradoxical. Perfect timing. We were like at exactly the same point as we were on Tuesday. That actually closes the door. Let me find. Oh, I have a lot of them. That closes the door on superiority theory, which brings us to our final one, which we will. Oh my gosh. Here we go. Our final theory that we'll visit, which will start today and we'll finish online. It just says incongruity up there, but it's actually called incongruity resolution theory. And you'll understand why after just the first slide, which is what we'll cover. So now we already know, you already know, that all humor, this is actually something we can say for certain. All humor in some way contains incongruity. That just means something somehow is out of place. Design violation theory calls them violations. And a lot of people have tried to describe what is it about incongruity? How is that something that's funny in the right way? Well, you remember the joke, right? Knock, knock. Thank you. Let us take our seats. Yes. Oh, man. So I've told you this joke before. Let me tell you the origin of this joke and its impact it's had on the Meyer household. This joke actually came from my older daughter, who's now 13. And when she was about 7-ish, somewhere in that ballpark, she came home. She must have heard it at school. And, well, Daddy was proud because, oh, look at my little comedian. She's studying humor. This is incongruity. Congratulations. It's a benign violation. No, I don't talk to her that way most of the time. So she comes up to me and says the joke, and I laugh and she laughs. But of course, then she keeps repeating it. And, oh, you're awesome. Good comedian. Well, she also told it to her then 3-year-old sister, Hayden, who she told the joke, and Hayden just looked bewildered. Like she knocked up, who's there? Gladys. Gladys, didn't know what she's doing. Let us take our seats. Walk away. And Kyla is mystified because why doesn't my little sister find this hilarious joke funny? And I tried to explain to Kyla, well, wait, she's just not old enough, her brain doesn't get it. But Kyla would keep trying, whatever. So this joke kind of goes away. Well, every once in a while, Hayden, she kind of picked up on, hey, Kyla says this, she laughs and people laugh. So Hayden would walk around the house and sometimes she would go up to you and say, not back, lettuce, monkey butt, like something completely nonsensical. And she would just die laughing and you're just like, you're laughing because it's adorable. But then like, what the hell? There's actually a word for that. We'll get development is next. I like it a lot. Child development is next. So we'll have a name for that. What's going on? Well, the long story short, this joke goes extinct in our household for a period of time. Hayden at this point is 3. Around the age of, well, close to 5. Hayden's kind of an older one in school. So she's close to 5, and we're actually going to preschool. This is her last year in preschool. And again, mind you, I hadn't heard this joke for a really long time in our household. It just went away. I'm driving her to preschool, which was incidentally here at Mount Union. So it's like a 15-minute drive or so. And Hayden is a talker. She's a chatterbox. You just can't shut her up. So her being quiet on the way to preschool kind of stuck out. And I didn't really dawn on me until we're like halfway there. I'm like, my brain's like, oh, Hayden's been really quiet. I'm just not feel good. So I'm looking in the little mirror, and no, she's not like bored or in pain. I see her in the back seat, and she's going, oh. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, what is going on? I'm like, Hayden, like, are you okay? She's like, yeah, I'm great. I'm like, okay. Like, there's nothing back there. And I'm like, what is going on? And like, she was so excited. She's like, I get it. I'm like, what? I have no idea what she's talking about. She's like, I finally get it. I'm like, what do you mean you get it? Lettuce. I'm like, what? I might still have no idea what the hell she's talking about. And she was just, let us take our seats. Let us take our seats. I get it. And she's so freaking, like, she just won the lottery. I almost had to pull over the car because I am just crying in tears, like trying to tell, my God, my wife, you don't believe, like I am just like dying laughing. I can't believe like she's doing this. Well, the reason I told you that story is because something happened inside her brain that wasn't possible just 2 years before. And there's a couple names it goes by. I wish we could just pick one, but they both mean the exact same thing. And we're also planting some seeds for the development chapter. A guy named Kessler called it, you don't necessarily need the last name. So a guy named Kessler called it by association. A guy named Apter called it synergy. Just dissect it for a second. What makes puns possible? Like, why is let us take our seats funny? What was she getting? The word, exactly, and what does that mean? It means let us and lettuce can have 2 different meanings. But to understand the humor, you have to be able to hold those 2 meanings in your head at the exact same time. If you can't do that, you're not going to laugh, which is why when she was 3, she just walked away. She said, well, let us take our seats. Why is that funny? Because her brain wasn't considering head of lettuce and let us at the exact same time. That's bisociation, also goes by the word of synergy. The ability to hold 2 meanings of something inside your head. Well, that's incongruity. That's exactly what incongruity is. You know how something's supposed to be, and you also know how something is being violated at the exact same time. You're holding the violation and the reality in your brain at the exact same time. That's what makes incongruity enjoyable when it's done in the right way. And of course, people have talked a lot about what that right way is, and we haven't written, I'm not sure if we even wrote this down. We just used this as a fun example on the first day to kind of get you guys thinking. Paul McGee he'll come up in the development chapter a lot, because that's kind of where he did all of his work. But McGee's theory of why something can be funny is all about incongruity. And just so I know you've got it, what are the 4 ingredients? It's been a while. Again, I'm not sure if I actually told you to write it down or not. I think we just kind of, this is the My Fair Lady, Stewie, I've grown accustomed to her face little deal that we did. Well, I'll say there's 4 of them. Yeah. Exactly. That's number 2. So number 1 is a schema. SCHEMA. A schema. You remember what we did that day? We listened to the real version of I've grown accustomed to her face from My Fair Lady. By listening to it, I gave you a schema. You never had. A schema is just a framework of knowledge, a computer file of information about anything in the universe. You have millions of schema inside your head. It's actually one of the fun parts about being a parent that you can really have fun with is your little 1-year-old and 2-year-old, they don't have basic knowledge you take for granted. You can really have fun. Never forget showing Hayden bubbles for the very first time. I think she thought I was a wizard. Like taking this thing and, whoa, what is this orb? And she so schemas, just files of information. You take them all for granted. So it's a schema, then you've got to see the schema violated somehow. It's got to be twisted. Without that, there's no humor. Number 3, you have to understand that this is like unrealistic or impossible. I mean, because if it's real, then it's not funny. It's like, what? Wait a second. And then the 4th one is typically a requirement. You need to be in a playful mindset. Right? If you're in a serious mindset, a lot of humor suddenly becomes unfunny because you're just not in the mood. So a schema, violation. But for a long time, people, especially with jokes, like knock-knock jokes and puns, we get it. I mean, the incongruity, yes, we're laughing and we get this by association happening, but what's the spark? What's the catalyst that's actually making us laugh, that makes us see that as humorous, the something extra? What is it? A little bit of elusive. Well, people started to call this the resolution. So incongruity by itself, not enough. You also have to have something they call the resolution. And so something called incongruity resolution theory rose to prominence in the field of humor research. It does a really good job. Again, every theory kind of has its own corner of the humor world that it helps describe. Incongruity resolution theory does a really good job of describing why riddles and puns and jokes, why we find a humor in a lot of those. You can stretch it, and you can stretch it and apply to other things too, but that's where it really works the best. They see humor as a problem-solving game, essentially. A puzzle that your brain is trying to solve. Very cognitive, cerebral theory about humor. So you see something, you read something, and your brain is trying to figure out, why is this funny? And that's exactly where we left off on Tuesday. We still got 5 minutes, but that's okay. Well, I'll cheat a little bit as you're sitting. Just consider this for a second. An English bishop received the following note from the vicar of a village in his diocese. My lord, I regret to inform you of my wife's death. I'm good at telling jokes if I can actually read them out loud. Oh, not so good. get it? Some people are like, what? I can't stop it once it's started. So you might as well write this down because, oh my gosh. There we go. So a guy by the name of Sulls, who was really big in this theory, presented what he called his two-stage model. So you laughed at that. Well, why? How do you solve the riddle? What's going on inside your brain cognitively? Well, of course, we've got the setup, which was the first part of the joke. The Lord, you know, we're talking about a vicar, so it's a priestly man, right? A holy man. And we know he's writing a letter, and I regret to inform you of my wife's death. Now, another thing that you may or may not know about a vicar, he's in charge of the services, so he's got to be there, right, in church. So here's the two-stage model. You've got a setup, and your brain, no matter what you're reading, your brain is automatically making a prediction of what's going to come next whenever you read something. So without giving you the punchline, as predicted, might be something like, I'm not going to be able to be there on Sunday, or I'm going to be going to the funeral, or something like that. So the question is what you read as predicted? If your prediction is correct, in other words, if you guess it, this is why knock-knock jokes become less funny. According to this model, you already know the punchline. So if it's as predicted, there's not going to be any surprise, and therefore there's not going to be any humor. If it's not as predicted, though, if you read that, and I saw a couple of you reading it, and you're like, because you even knew it was going to be a joke, I saw you just for at least a moment go, oh. Like you've had those moments, right? You're reading a joke, and it takes you a second. But then once you get it, like, oh, I get it. But your brain, so no, what your brain is doing is it's trying to find the rule. Like why is this funny? If you can fill in the blanks, great. There's humor. So if your brain finds the rule of course being, can you send me a replacement, could mean two different things. Now we're back to our multiple meanings. Even an 8-year-old who gets knock-knock jokes probably wouldn't laugh at this because they might not know even what a vicar is. You have to have that knowledge. What the hell's a vicar? If you think a vicar is a bartender, this isn't funny. It's more funny because the vicar is a holy man. And that potential of replacement wife that's funny because of who you're talking about. So your brain finds the rule, the multiple meaning and the vicar implication. I get it. Then there's humor. But if you can't figure it out, you just sit there staring at the screen, pretending you figured it out and laughing because all the other students are laughing. But really, you're just confused. And I'm sure you've all been in that position too. When someone tells a joke, like, what did you say that again? What? Or you read something like, I don't even get it. So if you're just confused, if your brain can't find the rule, then there's no humor. All right, but that's where we'll stop. It took you one slide beyond Tuesday. But have a good weekend. I don't see you. Virtual parent-teacher conference today. Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to Zoom for a long time once this thing is over. Right? Never done this before. So virtual. All right. Well, I'll see you next week. Use your disparaging humor for good.